Most of you have heard Dr. Ramachandran before. Hi, how are you? Um, she got her bachelor's in social work at Wayne State University, a master's in social work at Wayne State University. I think she liked Wayne State University. Doctor of audiology at Wayne State, and Doctor of philosophy at Wayne State University. Most of you know that, or you should know that she's a past president of the board of directors at American Academy of Audiology, and that was 2022 to 2023. Now she's a past president. I guess is that is that a formal declaration?
That's his, yep, I am a past president.
She, do you carry that with you? It's like
Forever. That sticks.
presidents for the rest of their lives are always called president somebody or president
I
whatever.
think sometimes they refer to us as dead presidents, but
Uh, the Dead President Society.
yes,
She's currently, you're currently with Oticon still? Yes?
correct. Yep. I'm
Audiology?
vice president of audiology for Oticon.
She is. And she is going to be speaking today on, wait a minute, it's been a long day. Ooh. What are you speaking on today?
It's on the screen. Audible, hopefully.
Oh, there you go. Audible contrast threshold. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I've
No
got papers
problem.
all over my desk here.
No, it's a good test of whether or not it's on the screen, so I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Oof. Okay, go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. So I think this is a really good topic, actually, and I didn't plan it this way, but following Angela's talk, I think this is a really great next step for you. What I'm going to talk about is nowhere near as comprehensive in terms of assessment or treatment for auditory disorders, but the audible contrast threshold, or what we refer to ACT, is a test that is designed to very rapidly assess a very specific type of auditory challenge, which is resolving spectrotemporal modulation in background noise, which is very similar to the skill needed to oftentimes to detect speech in background noise. And this gives us, this test gives us a really quick way to assess how a person is doing with that at a super threshold level. It allows us to have an estimate of how they might be able to perform when they are using hearing aids, and the audibility is there, but whether or not they're able to use those super threshold cues very well. And then, very importantly, like Angela said, we need to be able to do something with that. And so with the ACT test, we've been able to integrate those results into the Oticon hearing aids and have an evidence base for how to support patients when we know that they have that challenge in background noise. So when you think about audiometry, of course, the information that we do get is extremely important. In a lot of cases, it can tell us information about the potential etiology of the loss, and it could tell us information about audibility, which is extremely important because hearing aids are really designed to improve audibility. But what it doesn't tell us is how well the person might perform in noise. Speech and noise testing can absolutely get us closer, but there are just significant barriers to very common clinical implementation. So if you find yourself already using speech and noise, that's great. Speech and noise testing, I should say, that's great. But sometimes you're going to find, of course, that time is an issue, language dependency is an issue, and then audibility is actually an issue too, because when you are testing unaided, you don't actually correct for that audibility. You're presenting the speech at a consistent level, and so some of those speech sounds might be inaudible to a listener, and so on. So this gives us some additional information that we might not get from speech and noise testing. It also gives us, again, with our Oticon hearing aids, gives us an opportunity to say, this is an evidence base for how to support that. Right now, there's no clear way to have how to use speech and noise tests to directly program hearing aids to best support. It's sort of a, well, they're having more trouble, so I give them more support, but there's no direct amount of support that's required. And so that's what we're able to do with this test. So with that, I want to jump in a little bit and explain to you what the test is. Then I'll go through some of the evidence, and then I'll actually show you a case study of a clinical implementation of it, so you understand what that kind of looks like or could potentially look like for you. The audible contrast threshold was jointly developed by Interacoustics Research Unit, which is, of course, a diagnostic company. It can be used with other equipment other than interacoustics, which I will show you in a little bit. Eric's Home Research Center, which is our research center affiliated with Oticon, and then our Oticon researchers have also studied this in multiple independent clinics around the world. It's designed to help us know how to program the hearing aids to improve hearing and noise, and it's designed to be quick and easy. So the purpose of ACT is to predict how a person will perform on an ecologically valid speech and noise test. So that's the metric against which we measured this. So when a person's aided, how well they might perform in background noise. And that's the audible component of the audible contrast threshold test. So we're simulating an aided condition by making the frequency range of speech sounds audible during this test. Because the test is an audible signal, it requires that the person's audiometric thresholds have been obtained in order to establish what's inaudible to the patient and what is audible. So the ACT test is actually administered immediately following the audiogram. So you do your audiogram like you always would, but then you can immediately follow it with another 2 to 3 minutes of testing to get this super threshold measure. We also want to make sure that the tests could be used globally, so it needed to be language independent. So I'll show you a little bit more about that in a bit. But for now, the stimuli are what we call spectrotemporally modulated signals, or STM signals. These are signals that vary in time and frequency in a way that's similar to speech but isn't actually speech. And so we get rid of that linguistic dependency when we're able to do it this way. We also wanted it to be very quick to administer so that it could be adopted in clinical practice. And we wanted it to be meaningful in the help that it provides to people. So with speech and noise tests, you can understand the challenges, again, that a person experiences, but you don't actually have the specific guidance about what choices to make in the fitting and programming of hearing aids to optimize them for that person's problem. So for the Oticon hearing aids, the person's ACT value can be used in the fitting software. It can automatically be incorporated from NOAA, or it can be manually entered into our Genie fitting software. And then the help in noise settings, that directionality, noise reduction, will be adjusted automatically to provide the most appropriate starting level for support for that person. And the reason we want to do that is because we don't want to overdo that help in noise, meaning we don't want to overdo directionality. We don't want to overdo noise reduction because it can compromise sound quality, which we know is extremely important to users. So we want to make sure that we have just exactly the right amount of support to get them what they need, and then to balance that with the sound quality. So the evidence base to support that was really important to us. So spectrotemporal modulation refers to variations, go back here, in both the spectral or frequency component of the signal and the time component. It's key to understanding speech, be able to pull speech out of background noise. So a person's ability to do that is really important. And so you can see when you look at a spectrogram, and I'm sure many of you have seen these, you've got frequency on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. And what you can see is what frequencies are represented. And in this case, you've got the harmonics of a speech signal presented on the left side. On the right side, you can use a spectrotemporally modulated noise in order to mimic the type of speech signal that people are hearing. Now, proposing to use an STM signal in lieu of speech is not new. This has been looked at for many, many years. But our goal here was to actually take that research that was done and then put it into a clinically useful tool. And so what you see on the right side is you can take that, you can make a spectrotemporally modulated signal by taking a noise and modulating it so it looks like speech. Just like speech, speech is a noise generated by airflow through your vocal tract, and then your articulators, your mouth and your tongue and all that move in such a way that the sounds are shaped to a particular pattern. And just like that, we can take a noise source, and on the right side, what you're seeing is a pink noise, so a broadband noise, and it has been modulated to create a situation that has very much like the modulations that you would see in speech. So it's a very characteristic pattern. And so the goal is to have it be a stand-in for speech. So it's speech-like, but it's not speech. So you get that language independence. And you also don't get some of the confounding factors of linguistic knowledge and so on. You want to be able to kind of just assess how much speech and noise support they need. So what we do is there's two types of signals used in the test. There's this pink noise, that's a wideband signal, and it's unmodulated. And I'm gonna try something which I almost never do, but I'm gonna give it a shot here and see if you can hear this or not. And if Alan, maybe you can give me let me know if I'm wasting everybody's time with these or not. Is anybody able to hear that? Let me pull up the chat here, sorry. Yes. Oh, excellent. Wonderful. Thank you. And so that is that pink noise. And so when people are listening to this test, they're going to hear shh, 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 shh. I can't make the noise exactly the same, but that's what that pink noise is. Then you could have a signal that's a spectrotemporally modulated, and that would sound something like this. We tell patients that it sounds like a siren. It sounds a little bit more like a European siren, I think, but you can hear that it's got that modulation in it relative to the pink noise. So it's the same frequency bandwidth as that pink noise, but it's got this modulation in it for them to detect. Now that what you just heard was a fully modulated STM signal where you've got a kind of a maximum difference between the quiet spots in there and the noise. What we can do actually is to adjust the level of contrast between the noise and that spectrotemporal modulation. And in doing so, we can start to understand how good a person's resolution of that is. So
Hey,
that you'll
Virginia.
also hear,
Hey,
yes,
so sorry. I really
that's
want
it.
to hear this. I don't think it's sharing your computer sound. On the bar, the black bar on the
Yes,
far right-hand side, if you click the three dots, you can go share computer sound.
thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I know that
And
you
then
have,
there's a stereo option, and that'll be the best. Cool, thank you.
yeah, thank you. I am looking for it though, and I'm not seeing it.
Thank you for trying. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no, it's all right because I'm hoping I was hopeful. Let's see here. Um,
Stephen, can you give her a hand there?
I see my little,
Virginia, at the bottom
yes,
where you hit share,
yes.
you might need to unshare for a moment
Oh, okay.
and then restart your share.
And as you restart the share, when you click
Yes.
the slide you're going to share on the right-hand side, you'll see share computer sound and optimize for video.
Ah, thank you. Share sound, optimized for video, share. Ta-da. Well, let's give it a shot. Thank you. So let's try that pink noise again, this broadband frequency sound. Hold on. Do you hear that?
Yeah, and now
For
there's a
that.
black box covering your screen. I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry.
Probably that's the webinar chat. Is it gone now?
There you go.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been a minute since I've used Zoom, so appreciate the coaching here. So that is what that pink noise is. It's a broadband frequency. And so what we're going to add into that is this spectrotemporal modulation, and we're going to add in a lot of it. So there's a big contrast between background noise that they're listening to and the modulation. So that sounds like this. So there's kind of a lot of variability in there. And so that's the speech-like sound. It's not speech as you would know it, but it has the modulations that would be characteristic of a speech sound. And then we can adjust how much contrast there is and make it a little bit harder to hear that modulation in there. And so this is what that would sound like with this signal. So you can hear sort of there's a lot more background noise and then the modulation is a little bit less. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about these types of signals here. So let me just kind of come back to hopefully sharing my slide. All right. So when it comes to the research into how we could potentially use these types of STM signals, we needed to establish some criteria because the early work on this was using really pretty complex psychoacoustic methods that were very difficult and time consuming. And so the goal of the researchers was to make it very clinically viable. And so the ACT test, as we know it now, is that manifestation of that. The criteria were that it needed to be quick and it needed to use current hardware. So a lot of the audiometers that are out there right now are able to work with this test. Someone had the good idea of mimicking the modified Houston-Westlake method for detecting the contrast threshold level. And because audiologists are already doing that, they thought that might be a good solution for how to do this new, rather than to go into a bunch of other psychometric strategies that would be unfamiliar to people. And it was designed to not go into a lot of great detail to find that absolute threshold contrast level because you don't need to. It is in 4 dB steps, so you don't have to waste a lot of time being overly precise. We're kind of trying to understand just is this person having trouble and how much difficulty are they having? So it's a lot like using 5 dB step size for audiometric testing. Here we're limiting this to 4 dB step size and really looking at the area where we expect somebody might have difficulty. So when they're doing the ACT procedure, you're unaided under earphones, but the intensity level is automatically calculated to be audible across the frequency range, and I'll show you a picture of that. It's a binaural test, but the intensity level is ear specific. So if you do have an asymmetry, it's designed to be audible on each ear, just like you would have if you were doing some hearing aid fitting, you'd make it audible on both ears, regardless if there was an asymmetry or not. So during the test, those pink noise samples will be presented binaurally, so shh, shh, shh. And then randomly embedded in those are these STM signals. And they're varied in the level of contrast. So the highest contrast level would be 16, and the lowest contrast level would be -4. Now, this is not an actual -4 dB or a positive 16 dB signal to noise ratio. This is actually a contrast level that is relative to the contrast level needed for a group of young normal hearing listeners to detect the contrast. So they came up with what's called normalized contrast level. And so 0 dB NCL is the reference, and then we have -4 going from there and +16 going from there. So this, again, very similar to audiometric threshold in that 0 is not the absence of sound, it's the threshold for young normal hearing listeners. And then what we're looking at is the intensity of sound relative to that. So same idea here. We're looking compared to normal. Okay, now everybody's got to hear those sounds in a good way. So I'm going to try this video, see if this will work for us. And if you tell me no, I will. All right, I'm going to try the video. If it's not working, just pipe up and tell me, okay?
Okay, so we're ready to go?
Yes.
And I can see that you have the audiogram on the screen there, and that's because we need Susanna's audiogram in order to calculate that the levels that she's hearing is appropriate for her.
Absolutely, they need to be clearly audible.
Okay.
That's what makes ACT different. So we need to ensure that when you do complete the audiogram, that you have stored thresholds at 250 hertz, 500 hertz, 1 kilohertz, 2 kilohertz, and 4 kilohertz. Those are the mandatory frequencies. So we load up ACT. Once you go into ACT, a box will populate with some instructions for ACT. So it gives the clinician some guidance as to what to say and how to instruct our client.
Yeah, so that you know you've remembered to say everything.
Exactly. And there are also some sound examples within this portion here, which will allow you to familiarize your client so they know exactly what they're doing in the test. So once you've instructed the client, we can go ahead and proceed with the test. Susanna's done this a few times, so you feel pretty comfortable with the test?
Yes, sure.
Perfect. So would you like to pop on the headphones, Susanna, and we can get started?
All right.
So, ready?
Yeah, I'm timing you.
Okay, go.
Okay, she responds now, so that
Yeah.
means you make it softer.
Absolutely. And it's in the same Houston Westlake procedure. So down by 2 steps and up by 1 if she doesn't respond. So
Okay, no response.
no
there.
response.
Wow, that was quick. 1:34.
Yeah, I mean, Susanna has done this test before. On average, it does take roughly 2 to 3 minutes. But as you can see, we have our ACT value.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you a sense of what that might look like in real life, because what everything I've been talking about so far is pretty abstract. So let me get back here, move on. Now, what you saw was use of the interacoustics audiometer in order to do that. But what you really just need is any compatible audiometer, and you can see the list of compatible audiometers below there. You do need, of course, the transducers, and in this case, you need a patient response button. So if you're doing your audiometry with the patient response button already, then you're already doing that. If you weren't, then you would need to do that for this test. And the reason for that is because it actually looks for a response within a certain time window following the presentation of the stimulus. So when you think about clinical flow, supplementary measures, regardless of where you do those at the beginning or at the end, audiometry would precede ACT. And so that's where it falls naturally into that evaluation in order to, again, ensure that the stimulus is at a super threshold level for the person. So just a little bit slower than what you saw in the video. You've got the audiogram as your first place. In the interacoustic software in particular, you would go to the session list to select it. You do have to have 250, 500, 1000, 2000, and 4000 hertz. You'll have the current session on the screen there, and you'll just go in and select the ACT test from your list of options. There are instructions that will populate in a separate window, there are some sound samples so that they can be able to familiarize the patient with these signals, just like you would if you're doing audiometry. You can do talk forward and so on. What you see on the screen here is the contrast level on the y-axis. So which contrast level you're going to be, you can graph it out here. And at the bottom here, you can see what's the current contrast level presentation. The greatest amount of contrast is down here at 16. The least amount of contrast is up here at -4. And so you can think about this being constructed a lot like an audiogram, where the softest sounds are up at the top and the loudest sounds are at the bottom. This tracking trace is whether they have responded or not at any particular interval of presentation. And so you've got the total number of presentations that are potentially available is 30. What you see at the top is the stimulus level for each ear. So that is ear specific. That is automatically calculated based on the audiogram. Now, this is an overall level. It's going to be actually frequency specific, but it gives you an overall level of what it's presenting. In the middle is the contrast level that you're testing, and then at the end, it will give you the final value. There's a start button down here, and there will be a stop as well, so you can end the test as needed. So you, as the audiologist, present the stimulus, and then the test looks for a response from the patient. So they're asked to listen for that siren type of sound that they've already been familiarized to, and when they hear it, they press the button. In this case, the person heard it at this contrast level of 16. then they heard it at 12, then they heard it at 8. And so we're actually decreasing the level of contrast until in 4 dB steps until they actually get to a point where they no longer respond. So in this case, it was at 0 dB, or sorry, 0 contrast level. Then you go up 1 step, which is a 2 dB step size. They still didn't hear it. Then you go up again to where you're at 4. They did hear it. So they responded positively. Then you go back again, and so on until you get that 2 out of 3 responses. As I said, and let me come back here for just a moment. And so what you see here is that the 4 is actually the contrast level. It's actually calculated from a psychrometric function. And so you end up with actually 3.9 dB NCO. That normalized contrast level, again, is not an absolute level. It is relative to that group of normal hearing young people who have a 0 contrast level. And then this is how much contrast this person needs to hear that contrast relative to 0. And they'll get an ACT results. And this is how it's been categorized based on the normative data. Anywhere from -4 to 4 would be considered normal. Mild 4 to 7, moderate 7 to 10, and severe 10 to 16. Using ACT clinically, we can use it for many purposes. One can be simply counseling and really verifying that this person has a challenge. You can even kind of use it as a screening tool for whether they need additional evaluation. But we can automatically use it to calculate help in noise settings for the hearing aids. And so, of course, the more severe the contrast level deficit is, the more support we would need from hearing aids up to and including, of course, remote microphone technology, at least from the technical point of view. And of course, you can imagine that the more difficulty somebody has, the more they might benefit from auditory training and so on. So putting ACT to the test, this was done in multiple sites across the globe. What we wanted to do is to try to find very linguistically different types of sites and sites that might have differences in audiometric and audiologic way of working. So this was done in Germany at the University of Lübeck and in Japan at a clinic there. That was associated with the university hospital school. And so they measured the ACT values and speech and noise performance in a very diverse group of listeners. And so we wanted to understand, does the relationship with ACT values and speech understanding and noise into very different real life user groups still hold? And can ACT increase the prediction of speech and noise ability? So ACT was validated against a speech and noise test to see if it in fact could predict the speech and noise function. So in this case, they used 100 participants, mild to severe hearing loss, 32 to 79 years of age. They were ultimately fit with Oticon More 1 hearing aids, but the part we're looking at right now is just the ACT test, not with the hearing aids. So with the setup, what they did was they did the ACT test under earphones, like I just showed you, but then they listened in a background noise situation, like in a test booth, where you had noise coming from the back from 2 locations, and speech coming from the front. And it's meant to be, it's the HINT test, a hearing and noise test, which is a speech test, but it was made more challenging than it's typically done in a sound booth to make it a little bit more ecologically valid. The target speech was 65 dB SPL, and the level of background noise was set to what the individual user would need. And so, actually, sorry, I'm going to skip this slide here. It's out of place. So we wanted to look at the relationship between the predicted and measured SRTs and noise. So how did the ACT value stack up against their measured speech and noise function? And what you see in the gray circles are the German participants. The darker circles are the Japanese participants. And it had a really nice function of predicting that SRT from the ACT test. There's always outliers in every test, but you can see it overall had a really nice prediction and a really nice correlation. And then we can measure the actual correlation and see how much of the variability in that speech performance was predicted. They looked at age, pure tone average from the audiogram, which is important because, again, it shows what audibility is, but then ACT as well. And ACT alone provided evidence of explain more of the variability in the speech understanding. And then the nice thing is, if you put those three things together, you can actually see that you get the greatest amount of prediction. And in fact, that's what we do in the Oticon software, is it uses both the audiogram and ACT. And if you have the age in there as well, that gets imported, it will use that in terms of predicting aided speech intelligibility. So that's what we looked at there. So the test retest was evaluated as well. It was very high, 0.96 dB, so within 1 dB within the same visit. The average test time was 100 seconds. So that just really helped us to understand that, in fact, you could do this clinically, different populations. They were using 2 different types of hint tests, one in Japanese, one in German. And when it was made audible with the hearing aids, that speech and noise performance was very well predicted by the ACT test. So that's what we were looking at there. And then we wanted to understand if you could use ACT to provide a prescription within the hearing aids that lead to better outcomes than what the default prescription would be. The default prescription would have been based on the audiogram and the person's age. And we want to understand if by adding the ACT score in there, could we further refine the level of support in noise to have a better outcome for the person. And so what you can see again here is audibility measured by the audiogram. The more difficulty a person has in terms of just pure audibility, the more support we provide for help in noise in general. But with the contrast loss as measured by ACT, again, the more difficulty they have there, we would apply more support in noise. So, and then when you have 2 of those together, where they're having greater difficulty, that's where we would provide the highest level of support. So in order to verify the prescription of help in noise, and this is kind of like something we, again, haven't had before, because we have the audiogram and we have prescriptive formulas that help us understand how much gain to provide. But what we don't have is a real evidence-based way to say this is how much support in noise you should provide. This is how you should program the hearing aids to help given this person's difficulty with super threshold signals. So to look at this and develop that evidence base, they grouped this into 3 different groups. Good hearing and noise ability, which was normal in the ACT test, or that they had a mild degree. Then that moderate hearing and noise ability, that moderate group, and then the severe group that had the poor hearing and noise ability. And they wanted to understand how that speech performance and noise changed with different levels of help in the software for these 3 groups of people. So hopefully this graph will help you understand a little bit more. So we've got 3 groups of people: those who performed well with ACT, those who performed poorer, and those who performed the worst on the ACT test. So those 3 groups. And then you had a group of people who performed normally on this test. And so when they were normal, they actually fell in terms of measured SRT to be -10 to -5. So that was the speech contrast that they needed for this hint test in order to be successful. So with normal hearing. And so our goal is, what's the minimum amount of support in noise that's needed to allow these people to have a normal level of performance? Their performance is not normal, obviously, because they have hearing loss, but what would it take to get them into a range where they're able to engage effectively with people who have that more normal ability? And so there were 4 different help levels. One was where the instrument didn't have the noise reduction on. Then there was a lower level of noise support, medium level, or a high level. And so that would be how we adjusted the settings. And for Oticon, it's called More Sound Intelligence, where the directionality and noise reduction are. And what we found is for that group that had just a mild contrast loss and hearing loss, they actually only needed that lowest level of help in order to get into that normal range of performance at a minimum. Then when you took that group that needed more help, they needed that medium level of support to get there. And then those who had the worst performance and had the greatest difficulty with contrast, the highest level of support got them closest to that normal range of performance, but not all the way. And so for that group, we would recommend, again, other strategies to help support, for example, from a technology point of view anyway, like remote microphone technology, so that they can get the right dosage of help and noise. So with that, with the Genie implementation, what we found when we did the testing was that about 50% of the people who were using an ACT test ended up with a different prescription than the default setting in Genie. So it actually did make a difference in how the hearing aid was programmed for 50% of the users. So that was meaningful. And so now you can do that with several generations now of the Oticon hearing aids, more real and the intent. And then the last part that I wanted to share with you was about integrating ACT into clinical practice. So we have had this out for a while now, and we wanted to find out for some real world experiences in the US, in this case, how were people doing with it if they did implement it clinically? Because that's one thing to do this as a research study. It is an absolute other thing to do this in your clinical space. And so we actually went to a clinic that I used to work at for about 10 years, Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. This is a very busy ENT-based clinic in a hospital. And so we wanted to see in that type of very dynamic environment, would it be feasible to do ACT on a lot of patients, to be able to use this as that screening tool and to be able to see, who in fact does need the help and what outcomes they found from that. So they actually tested this on 108 people. And of that 108, those ranged in from 22 to 96 years old, with a median age of 61 years. So you can see compared to the lab-based research, or sorry, the research in the clinics, this was a wider age range, possibly more consistent with what you might see with the much older patients were included in this as well. It was incorporated into the clinical test battery. So they performed admittance measures, pure tone audiometry, and then speech audiometry. And then they did the ACT test. In this clinic, they performed speech testing in quiet, specifically as a tool to screen for rollover. So speech in quiet is tested at a high level just to see if there's rollover. So it's not really meant to be an assessment of how well they would perform in noise. It's meant to just screen for retrocochlear disorder. So that was what they did for this. And they did find that they were able to get results on 100 of those 108 people. So 93% of the people that they tested, they were able to get successfully completed results. Of the 8 people that couldn't complete the test, they felt that there was cognitive impairment. And in one case, there was debilitating tinnitus. So the person couldn't perceive the signals. One person and a couple of people had difficulty understanding the task. And this was due to language barriers, which is an interesting feedback that we've now gone back to Interacoustics with to let them know, because while the test stimuli is language independent, the test instructions are language dependent to whatever market you're in. And so if you're so the test instructions are available like in individual locations, but for the audiologist to be able to communicate the test to the person and what they're supposed to do, it's helpful if they're speaking the same language. And so we're working on, how could we revise the test instructions to make it more accessible across languages. So, but anyway, so they were able to do this on 93% of the patients, and it took 1 to 3 minutes for them to complete the testing following the audiogram. And they were very intrigued by the results because as Angela mentioned, you've got a lot of people out there who have normal pure tone audiograms. So of the 100 people who they did get a result on, 25 of those people had normal pure tone audiograms. Now, 14 of those people had a perceived hearing complaint. And you might wonder, like, okay, well, what about the other people? Why were they being tested if they had normal pure tone thresholds and didn't even have a hearing complaint? And basically, these were balance patients. They were patients who came in because they were dizzy. They were being seen prior to ENT appointment for dizziness. And so they actually made a really nice control group because they didn't have any auditory issues that they were concerned about. Now, of those 14 people who had a perceived hearing complaint, they actually found 4 that had elevated ACT values. So it was actually more sensitive than their current test battery would have been at detecting a really specific, measurable challenge for these people who had that perceived hearing complaint. Now, that's not to say that there isn't something else going on with the other 10 people who had a perceived hearing complaint. They would need further testing to get to the bottom of that. But this was one way to say, okay, this is a spectrotemporal issue at the very least. And so we need to be able to pay attention to that when we're fitting the hearing aids. So it had some good sensitivity to I'm going to see if the numbers in here. Yeah. Now, for that group of people that had normal pure tone thresholds without a perceived hearing complaint, those 11 people who were predominantly there because of dizziness, they all had normal ACT values. And so we didn't pick up anything from people who did not have an auditory complaint. They actually all performed normally. So it had a really nice specificity in addition to its sensitivity. The other thing that was found was, again, this clinic does word recognition in quiet, again, to screen for rollover, which can be indicative of retrocochlear disorder, in addition to other suprathreshold problems. But that's primarily why we're doing it in this ENT clinic. And they looked at the group of people who had 100% word recognition in quiet. These were NU6 ranked word lists. There were 37 people who had 100% word recognition. Only 65% of those people scored in the normal range on ACT. And then they found that 27% had a mild challenge and 8% had moderate. So again, it was finding that there were greater challenges for people who would have otherwise looked very normal given their speech understanding in quiet. So with that, I'm going to pause here, and that was what I had to share with you. And it's good I finished up a little bit early here, so we can take some questions, hopefully. And if you don't have enough for me, we can always go back to Angela, I think. So one question I see here, will there be a possibility to expand the test protocol to work with other audiometers, given that there are challenges to change existing audiometers to the ones listed, allowing more providers to use it? Because of the nature of the test, where it really has to be done immediately following the audiogram, and it's really based on having equipment to do that. I don't know that there's any intention right now to develop a standalone version of it, because it would still need to be run on the computer, but it might be independent of the audiometer. So I'm not sure what the absolute plans are for that, if there's a plan to go back and develop an independent version of the test. If they did, it would make it a little bit more unwieldy in terms of clinical implementation, which at that point, then the question is, is it worth doing the ACT test, or is it more appropriate to just go to some other more comprehensive tests where you might need a little bit more time or have that extra time to do it. So yeah, so that's the answer to that one. I don't know the answer, but not that I know of.
I think that there were a couple other questions in there that might have
Great.
gotten deleted when we deleted some of the questions that were for Angela's. So if you didn't hear your question get answered, please put it in the question box again.
Okay, I see.
Alan, I think those questions were for the previous presentation.
I think there were one or two in there that were further. That's all right. Okay, well, if you don't have any more questions here for Virginia, we're going to let her go. That was an interesting talk. We've had an interesting afternoon. I really, really appreciate your talking and getting together with us today. And have a wonderful day. Does anybody else have anything else for her? Nope. Okay. I did have some people who wanted to get in touch with Angela. The easiest way, really, if you just Google her, she will, there she is, right there. Just Google her, she will come there. You'll get all kinds of information. You can go to her website, and her website has a ton of information, how to get trained. It's a whole plethora of stuff.
I did find the questions finally, sorry.
They did.
Just one question that I saw, I think people asked how would they get hold of ACT, and I would just contact your diagnostic representative. For most people, it's like E3, but in different parts of the country, there's some other as well. So kind of whoever's doing your diagnostic distribution, they'd be able to get that test for you. It's going to become standard if you're like purchasing new audiometric equipment, but there's a upgrade module that you can do just to get the test.
Okay, good. And let's see, I think somebody asks what your Derby name is, Angela.
And I'm so sorry because I left the chat to come back in, and so it erased all the questions on my side. I was going to type answers, but oh well. My roller derby name is Merica, like America. So yeah, it's okay.
And like I say, the rest of it was just people who want to get in touch with you for everything under the sun. Training, what is this?
Facebook.
Oh, Facebook.
Ask her if.
You can ask her.
Sorry.
Is this Carol?
Kathy.
Oh, Kathy. Sorry, Kathy.
I've been pestering you. But when I used the QR code, it brought me to your Facebook.
Oh no.
It did. It took me to your Facebook and it told me to leave a message.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, sorry. Which I have 3 QR codes that you guys had in there. Which part were you wanting to get in touch with me? Were you wanting to jump on for the short film or get the map?
It said get in touch with you, and then it brought me to your Facebook.
Oh, okay, cool. So LinkedIn is probably the best way. I'm dropping lots of knowledge people do or don't want to hear there. But yeah, so thank you. Hey, Alan, thank you for all of your hard work putting this together.
Was this a lot of fun today or what?
I think it was great. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed hearing from Virginia. This is the first time I've heard Virginia speak. I would love to use the ACT pre and post with auditory training because I do think that we would see a change. So I mean, we all need more speech and noise tasks, especially ones that are repeatable and ones that are quick. And it sounds like the ACT is both of those. Did you mention, sorry, can I ask a question? Is that all right?
Not at all. Now, are you kidding?
I'm not allowed. Virginia, what is, I know, I'm sorry. What is the maximum amount of hearing loss a person can have to use with the ACT?
Yeah, there's not a specific value that we're aware of, but eventually it will, you'll end up with not having a very high sensation level, right? So through a severe degree of hearing loss. And then what you'll see is eventually too, there will be, sometimes people will time out on the number of values. So that tends to be like, again, some of those people, and at Henry Ford, it was that 8% or 7% that couldn't do it. And sometimes they just run out of the trials. So this is feedback that we've given to interacoustics to be able to expand the range of people who might be tested. But again, at a certain point, it's like, well, if they're not doing well on this, that's an indicator that they're having a problem. And so we need to go to a much more, again, comprehensive solution, and that hearing aids are probably not the most ideal solution for that type of person either. Now, again, there's always people who are definitely cochlear implant candidates, but for whatever reason end up using hearing aids. So we need to find ways to treat them, but it's sort of within this range of performance. What can we do with the hearing aids in terms of programming? And when they get to having a more severe problem, it's like we're going to need more comprehensive testing and more comprehensive solution for those folks for sure.
That's amazing. If there are any researchers that are just like looking for something to do, I would love to see an ACT and HHIA correlation. I'd love to see that. Wow.
Yeah. I've got a lot of people out there who are really interested, and we want to take this further and see, where the options are in terms of fatigue and listening effort and so on and so forth. Lots of
you could always drop that in Doug's lap.
Hey, Doug.
Doug, got something for you to do.
Doug
He only likes 2 minutes each in noise test.
While you're on the plane to somewhere else to talk.
For sure. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you all both so much. I got such a positive response from both of you from our chat and everything that I may just invite you back next year.
I'd love it.
Bye-bye, all.